Welcome to the ADNA Presents. Today we have Dr. Tabitha Kenlon joining us. She works at the university level teaching English, among some many other things that I'm so excited to talk with her about. She has become a confidant and a friend and has really kept me going when I have felt stuck in my own professional pursuits. Thank you for joining us, Tabitha.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and what a lovely introduction.
I'm really excited to have a few conversations about where we are. The changes that have been happening in my industry have made me look at things a little bit differently. One of the things that's been really interesting in our conversations and why I wanted to invite you on this podcast is to share some of the things that you've been enjoying and also some of the things that you're working towards. Let's start with you being an English professor and teaching at the university level. What is something that feels enriching to you? Like at the end of a day, when you're celebrating the good things that you love about that particular skill set, what comes to mind?
I really do love the conversations with students. The best, most enriching classes are the ones where I'm not doing the majority of the work, where the students are exploring and coming up with ideas and offering their own unique perspectives. I don't know everything. I drive my students a little nuts sometimes when we're working on literature, and they'll say, why did this happen? Why did Frankenstein run away from the creature after it opened its eyes? And I'll say, oh, that's a great question. What do you think? Why did he run away? But there isn't an answer. Students have just come up with so many interesting things. It's collaborative yet individual at the same time.
I think about my own experience in being taught. The boredom was something I could taste. It was so stilted and lecture-y, almost designed to be a torture test. And then those other times, I did feel like I was on this journey and was gently pointing things out. It wasn't like I was told the questions, but the space was open for me to explore that. There's something about, I'm going to use the word vulnerability in the Brené Brown sense, that vulnerability of, I don't know, let's look at this with curiosity and openness. That itself is what you are instilling in the students. Isn't, okay, here's the answer to question 26, it's B. It's fill in the blank, or really process that. Why does that work for you, do you think?
I guess I've just always been drawn to creativity. I was a book kid, with the flashlight under the covers, and also a little bit of a theater kid. So just the power of imagination and creativity and story. But that vulnerability, like all of those things involve risk. You can't be imaginative or creative without risking something. When I first started teaching in grad school, we had that first year teaching grad student support group. One of the things we talked about was that relationship with the authority of the teacher. Some people have a very hard time admitting to students that they don't know something, whereas other teachers, and I try to be this teacher, to embrace that and say, wow, that is a fantastic question, and I do not know. If it's a bit of information that you don't know, let's figure out how to find that information together. If it's a request for an explanation or something that is more perspective-based, then I think it's really important for me to not give my opinion straight off, because it can feel like, oh, teacher says that Frankenstein runs away from the creature because XYZ, and then they'll stop thinking because I've given them the answer. But if I can bite my tongue and not give them my own personal opinion on that situation, it gives them the opportunity. And it is hard for students as well, because a lot of them have made it through 12 or plus years of teaching, where it is quite often instructional, and they do often regard the teacher as the voice of authority. Developing their own ideas or pushing back can be a little scary at first. I think particularly in the writing and English literature, maybe all humanities classrooms, there is an extra layer of vulnerability because some of the questions can end up feeling rather personal. If I'm asking, what do you think about something, then it's not, oh, 2 + 2 is 4. No emotional vulnerability there. It's easy to create distance between yourself and the answer. You're not risking anything.
Yeah.
But if I ask you to write about your experience with education, or keep picking on Frankenstein, but Mary Shelley is brilliant. She wrote Frankenstein when she was like 18.
Wow.
Yeah, some people give her credit for helping to create the genre of science fiction. Asking students' perspective on literature, it is personal, so there is that risk. It's important for me as a teacher to create a supportive, safe environment where you can risk and put your ideas out there and not feel like you're going to be laughed at, dismissed, or belittled.
I'd imagine that after years of not having that kind of guide, not only are those personal experiences of the students kept away, but there probably also could be that Dunning-Kruger effect, that sense of, I know everything, and so I'm going to say I know everything, but literally know nothing. That there's that arrogance that comes through ignorance. And by you modeling and risking, saying, yeah, I don't know, what do you think? That becomes that collaboration in a way that, as you said, it's supporting and unlearning a lot of previous teachers in a way that can really open things up. This is a podcast about audio description. What I love about this is that we could probably avoid using those words throughout this whole interview and still keep it relevant. There are similar issues of coming to the table of accessibility and saying, I don't know. And to have that collaboration, whether it's with filmmakers, distributors, those who are creating audio description for the first time, or those who have been doing it for years, that there can be this sense of vulnerability and openness. Going back to what you're saying in the classroom, I'm assuming it's virtual, yes?
Right now, 2 of my 3 jobs are teaching. One is in person and one is virtual. I've been teaching remotely for the American University of Afghanistan for about 2 years now. It's been incredibly fulfilling. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Obviously, there's benefits and challenges with both. For you to say it's been so rewarding, I'm assuming that has been the virtual experience.
Yes, I taught virtually for a few months back in 2020 with the pandemic. I was teaching full-time at a university in Dubai, and we had, like everybody else, switched to online. And at first, it was a really difficult transition for me. I found it difficult to teach sitting down because I was always a dynamic, active teacher, scribbling on the whiteboard, walking around class and up and down the aisles. Part of that was because I was legally blind, so I would want to get close to students so I could see their faces. But in the last 5 years, my eyes have gotten worse, and I'm even more legally blind now than I was then. I find teaching online solves some accessibility problems for me. It's very easy to share materials with students because I can share my screen and I don't have to worry about trying to get the technology in the classroom to be accessible, or have the problem that once I've put something on a projector, I can't see it anymore. But if it's on my screen, I can see it. If I give students access to a Google Doc or send them a link, they can bring it up on their devices, whatever their own access needs might be. We're all able to tweak, personalize, and make any adjustments we individually might need. So it was actually hard to transition back to teaching in person. I've had to be more creative making teaching in person work than teaching online. Most of my students are in Afghanistan. The infrastructure isn't always the best. A lot of them will keep their cameras off to save bandwidth and internet access. I've been in faculty meetings where faculty will complain about not seeing their students' faces. It doesn't really bother me because even if they had their cameras on, it would just be a blob. I can't really distinguish faces. And I find it both amusing and exasperating when people get so ocular centric, where they just feel completely lost. They can't see faces. And I do understand that For some people, the visuals are very important. And I've used to be a visual learner, so I found the loss of that continually difficult. I don't want to dismiss other people's access needs needing the visual, but it often just feels like an automatic reaction that doesn't have a lot of thought. In a physical classroom, I'm used to seeing my students' faces, and if I don't have that now, it must be bad. Can we think this through? Um, so it hasn't been a problem for me.
I think
Yeah.
about that focus you still are able to have in the sense of connection with the students. Like you said, the ocular is not as important. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but can we say that the ocular is not important as the connection with the students? Yeah.
I think that the ocular is not required to have a connection with the students.
Gotcha.
I do keep my camera on so the students can see me in case that is important to them. I find myself quite easily feeling connected to them as long as I can hear their voices. Even when they're putting stuff in the chat, as long as there is some kind of communication happening. It is funny because I do disclose to my students, because it does take me a little longer to navigate around a screen. I do disclose my eyesight limitations to them, and I allow it to be part of the conversation if it's appropriate. Some of the writing workshop examples I have for them and articles I have them read involve ableism and accessibility, reasonable adjustments, and that sort of thing, just because I want them to be aware that this is a thing that people need to talk about, because I'm always dismayed at the lack of attention that higher education gives to access. Education is all about access and opening minds and horizons so that it isn't constantly a bigger part of the conversation. So sometimes when I'm having an individual conversation with a student, if they stay after class to ask a question, once it's just me and them, they will quite often turn on the camera. They seem to find a bit of relief or excitement revealing themselves, but I'm just like, you're still just a blur. I do find it interesting that they are trying to reciprocate by turning on their camera, even if it's not as meaningful to me visually. The gesture, I think,
Yeah.
is still
Yes.
meaningful. That especially most of my students are young women in Afghanistan, so their lives are often incredibly restricted under the Taliban. So for them to figuratively unveil themselves, I appreciate that gesture for what it is. And even if I can't see the details of their faces, knowing that they have the comfort level to do that. I don't think badly of anyone who doesn't. It doesn't mean that they're not interested in making a connection, but if it is meaningful for them, I will be grateful for it.
That connection, it's a different kind of risk, but also similar to what risk that you're bringing in the sense of what you said earlier about I am not the ultimate authority. I don't know, but I'm guiding this conversation. You're modeling that not only in the structure of what you're teaching, but also I think as you said that you're disclosing the use of your eyesight or lack of certain aspects of it. And to talk about that, there was a word that you used in the context there, which was appropriate. That stuck out to me, that there are times where that is appropriate as you lose your vision, that there are times where you become this educator for disability instead of the educator for the lesson plan for what you're trying to focus on. I can imagine that can be a speed bump on the freeway that you want to get to. And at the same time, that also brings some opportunity. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we could take, I think, an entire and perhaps, collaboration opportunity. We should do an entire series. I don't ever, in the classroom setting, devote a lesson to this is what ableism is, or this is what a reasonable adjustment might mean. These are my needs as someone with low vision, but my needs are quite different from someone who is deaf or hard of hearing. Sometimes my needs clash with the needs of someone with a different disability. I don't have a lesson where I talk through that, but I've been trying to sprinkle little mentions and miniature lessons throughout the course material. When I'm doing this, I have a slide presentation on building a paragraph and what are the different elements that you need for a strong paragraph. You've got your topic sentence, your contextual explanation, your example, and what is so meaningful about this example. Readers are lazy. We have to do some of this work for them. And the instance, sort of the imaginary essay that I write this paragraph for is for the cause or effect essay that the composition students are writing. Theoretical essay is the effects of ableism on my education. I use an actual situation from when I was doing my second master's degree, in which the teacher shared a video that was completely inaccessible to me. There was no audio description and there was a lot of text on screen. Most of the spoken words were in Spanish. My college Spanish was not equal to the task. So I was just completely excluded. There was no transcript or anything like that. I was completely excluded from the video and the discussion that followed. When my professor did actually call on me and ask what I thought about something, I was like, I have no idea. It was horrible in a lot of ways. I shaped this paragraph around that moment. I'm teaching my students now two things in one: how to construct a paragraph for this essay that they're writing, but they're also learning about inaccessible classroom materials that have a negative impact on my learning. It's not a lesson on ableism. It's a lesson on how to construct a paragraph, but it's also a lesson on ableism. So I try to do that sort of thing, just sprinkle it in so it's part of the conversation, but I never want them to think that I am forcing my personal situation down their throats. I want it to be a part of the conversation. The class isn't about me. I'm only the tour guide, but I want to address as many different issues as I can in one class. I have a suspicion that I am getting some of them to think about disability in ways that they haven't before. One of the research papers that my students wrote in the spring semester was about delivering mental health services to women in Afghanistan under very draconian Taliban rules. She went through multiple drafts and built the paper as required. In her final paper, for the first time, had a couple paragraphs on women with disabilities and the difficulty of reaching women with disabilities. And she hadn't mentioned that in the early versions, and was something that we, again, briefly touched on through the class. I flatter myself that I can't help wonder if that made it in there because of things that we talked about in class. And if she'd had a different teacher or a non-disabled teacher, that maybe she wouldn't have thought about it. It did make me feel like I've added something new to her perspective on the world.
It aligns with what you said, as you said, about the way that you teach. This aligns perfectly. I can't help but think back to the Frankenstein story and how creature is this other. Before anything happens, this creature is met with all sorts of negative reactions from the society, and his survival is adapting for a world that's not built for him. And the fact that she wrote this at 18, the recognition of, oh, wow, she gets it. My experience with the Frankenstein monster story has always been, oh, that's the evil one, until I actually saw it. And forgive me for seeing it and not reading it. I only need to read it.
Absolutely. Yeah. You must.
So it's like that kind of responsibility that is almost inherent in the storytelling. I love that you said sprinkled in. This is how you talk about it. Back to the original question about appropriate conversation. It's not, we are going to have a lecture about disability. It's the lived experience, yeah?